Remember when the future solved crime, banned swearing, and somehow turned Taco Bell into fine dining? In 1993, Demolition Man exploded into theaters from Warner Brothers. Directed by Marco Brea and starring Sylvester Stallone as John Spartan, the loose cannon cop frozen in time, and Wesley Snipes as Simon Phoenix, the bleached blonde mechanic who thought out to tear a sanitized utopia apart. Sandra Bullock co-starred as Lenina Huxley alongside Dennis Leary as underground rebel Edgar Friendly. The premise was gloriously simple. A violent cop and an even more violent criminal are cryogenically frozen in 1996 and revived in 2032, where physical contact is illegal, profanity comes with a fine, and the most dangerous weapon in society is a bad attitude. Today, we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Demolition Man. And stick around for number 1 because the franchise wars, they weren't just in the script, they were happening in the editing room. And before we jump in, hit like, subscribe, and hype this video. It helps YouTube show this to more retro movie fans just like you. Alright, let's take a trip to a far, far time. 2032. Number 15. The Three Seashells Mystery. Demolition Man predicted video calls, self-driving cars, and the death of physical contact. But the single greatest contribution this movie made to American culture is a toilet gag that nobody can explain. 3 decorative seashells sit next to every toilet in San Angeles, completely unexplained. And the writers intended it that way. Screenwriter Daniel Waters hit a wall trying to dream up a futuristic bathroom and called fellow screenwriter Larry Karaszewski for help. Karaszewski happened to be sitting in his bathroom at the time, spotted a decorative bag of seashells on the toilet tank, said it out loud, and Waters wrote it down. A 30-year obsession was born from interior decorating and bad timing. Stallone's John Spartan stares at the shells in total confusion while Sandra Bullock's Lenina Huxley laughs at him, and every single person in the theater made that exact same face. Stallone offered a theory in 2006, 2 shells used like chopsticks, third one for scraping, but Waters dismissed it as not futuristic enough. Rob Schneider suggested the shells were decorative covers hiding toilet paper dispensers, and Waters called that cheating. A civilization that fines you for swearing isn't hoarding Charmin behind a conch shell. Number 14. Too fast for the camera. Wesley Snipes holds black belts in Shotokan Karate and Hapkido, which is the kind of resume that makes you a terrible person to share a fight scene with. When cameras rolled on Demolition Man, the crew discovered this the hard way. Snipes was moving so fast that his strikes were blurring on film, with monitors picking up streaks of motion instead of clean impacts, making the villain look like a rendering error instead of a lethal maniac. The fight coordinators had to pull him aside and ask him to slow down, telling him to exaggerate the movements and stretch out the strikes so the lens could do its job. This man was simply too good at hitting people, and they needed him to be worse at it. Stallone, meanwhile, strapped on Kevlar-style padding and reinforced body armor under his police uniform so Snipes could actually connect. When Phoenix kicks Spartan in the ribs during the final showdown, there's a very real chance that boot landed with full force. The armor ate the impact and Stallone ate the ego adjustment, and that competitive energy between the two is exactly why their fights feel so raw and physical. Number 13. The $69 million future cars. Most sci-fi movies slap fiberglass on a golf cart, add a light strip, and hope nobody looks too closely. Demolition Man convinced General Motors to hand over vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. The futuristic cars gliding through San Angeles weren't props. They were actual concept car prototypes, the kind GM keeps behind velvet ropes at auto shows while executives say things like, "the future of mobility," and nobody's allowed to touch anything. The star of the fleet was the 1992 GM Ultralight, a carbon fiber prototype with gull-wing doors and fuel efficiency that would make a Prius weep. GM sent over 18 concept cars and 16 ended up on screen, with the total estimated fleet value sitting at $69 million. The production team wisely built non-driving fiberglass shells for background shots and anything remotely risky. The original Ultralight still exists and has been displayed at the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA, and it still somehow looks like it belongs in 2035. Number 12. The song that named the movie. A Stallone action movie got its name from a post-punk song written in a guest bedroom in Ireland. Sting wrote Demolition Man in 1981 while staying at Pete Townshend's house, and the track landed on the Police's Ghost in the Machine album. Grace Jones actually released her version before the Police did, stripped down, moody, and dripping with icy early 80s cool. So by 1993, this track had already lived two completely different lives before Stallone ever touched it. For the movie, Sting re-recorded the whole thing with a harder, more industrial edge, less reggae sway and more dystopian swagger, and the result scored a Grammy nomination for Best Rock Vocal Performance. Producer Joel Silver reportedly loved the original song so much that it actually inspired the film's title. An entire big-budget action movie named after a police deep cut, and somehow that's one of the less weird things about this production. Number 11. The Star Who Said No. Sylvester Stallone personally reached out to Jackie Chan to play Simon Phoenix, and the logic tracked perfectly. Elite martial artist, global star, incredible physical performer. The fight choreography alone would have been absurd, but Chan turned it down flat, and his reason was pure brand management. He had a strict rule against playing villains or characters who died on screen, because his audience, especially younger fans, saw him as the good guy. Playing a psychotic bleach-blonde anarchist in a dystopian Stallone movie was about as far from that image as you could get. So Chan walked. The role landed on Wesley Snipes, and that single casting shift completely rewired the movie's DNA. Critics quietly admitted that Snipes stole the entire film, not by being bigger or louder, but by being genuinely unpredictable in every scene he touched. Chan would have delivered a masterclass in choreography, but Snipes gave the movie a full personality transplant. Number 10. The scene that was a nightmare to film. Stallone had survived boxing matches, cliffhanging stunts, and 12 rounds with Mr. T, yet one of the worst experiences of his professional life involved standing completely still inside a tube. The cryogenic freezing scene required him to be sealed into a form-fitting mold, locked inside a cylindrical rig, and slathered in thick translucent gel to simulate cryofluid. He was trapped in that apparatus for 5 to 8 hours at a stretch with arms and legs unable to move, and getting him out required actual tools. The critical detail is that Stallone is extremely claustrophobic. Being vacuum-sealed upright inside what amounted to a high-tech sarcophagus wasn't mildly uncomfortable. He described the experience as a living nightmare and told the crew that if he started screaming, they needed to get him out immediately, the problem being that immediately still meant several minutes of extraction. The scene is supposed to show Spartan calmly suspended in cryosleep, stoic and heroic, but if you watch his face closely, that tension is not acting. Number 9. The Comic Book and the Broken Game. Demolition Man hadn't even finished its theatrical run before the 90s merchandising machine kicked the door in. DC Comics looked at a Stallone movie and decided they could stretch it into 4 issues. The Demolition Man miniseries launched in November of 1993, retelling the film's plot with extra internal monologue and deeper dives into San Angeles' sanitized society, wrapping up in February of 1994, just in time to ride the VHS wave. Then came the video game, and God bless the developers for trying. It dropped players into a side-scrolling shooter that felt like Contra had been left in the microwave too long, then randomly flipped to a top-down perspective like it was having an identity crisis mid-development. The controls handled like a shopping cart with a broken wheel, and the difficulty spikes felt like the game was actively punishing you for spending money on it. Together, the comic and the game stretched Demolition Man's shelf life well past what any movie deserved. Number 8. The movie renamed as Rambo. In Kuwait and several other Middle Eastern markets, Demolition Man wasn't released as Demolition Man. It went out as Rambo the Destroyer. The logic was beautifully shameless. Stallone's face plus muscles plus the Rambo brand equaled guaranteed ticket sales. So why build awareness for a new franchise when you could slap the most bankable action name on the planet across the poster? Posters even borrowed the Rambo-style font and visual branding, blurring the line between John Spartan and John Rambo so aggressively that you'd think they shared a bank account. Picture being a moviegoer in Kuwait in 1993, buying a ticket expecting mud and bandanas and helicopters exploding over a rainforest, and instead the lights go down, and you're watching platinum blonde Wesley Snipes doing karate in a cryo prison while Sandra Bullock explains how society banned handshakes. That's not a sequel. That's an ambush. Number 7. The hidden Jack Black cameo. Next time you watch Demolition Man, keep your eyes locked on the underground scenes because a then-unknown Jack Black is hiding down there. His credited role is Wasteland Scrap Number 2, which sounds less like a movie character and more like something you'd write on a resume during a rough year. You can spot him when Spartan and Lenina head underground to meet Dennis Leary's Edgar Friendly. Black is tucked among the rebels and actually has a line, pointing at Stallone and blurting out, "He's the one. He's the one who's going to kill Phoenix." The delivery is pure, uncut early Jack Black energy. This was 1993, 7 years before High Fidelity and a full decade before School of Rock. He was grinding through bit parts trying to get a foothold in an industry that hadn't figured out what to do with him yet. Once you notice him, it's impossible to unsee. Those expressive eyebrows and that manic enthusiasm radiating off a guy with maybe 4 seconds of screen time make him stand out like a future rock star who accidentally wandered into a dystopian support group. Number 6. The actress who was replaced. Before Sandra Bullock became everyone's favorite wide-eyed future cop, the role of Lenina Huxley belonged to Lori Petty. She was cast, showed up, filmed for 2 or 3 days, and then she was gone. Producer Joel Silver pulled the plug without any public explanation, and Sandra Bullock stepped into a role that would help launch her into the stratosphere. When Bullock walked onto that set, speed hadn't happened yet. She wasn't America's sweetheart or a household name. She was a working actress who got a last-minute call and had no time to overthink it. She just showed up and outcharmed everyone. The character's name is also a quiet literary wink. Lenina Huxley, as in Aldous Huxley, the man who wrote Brave New World, a novel about a sanitized, pleasure-controlled society where individuality gets quietly suffocated by a benevolent system. The filmmakers named their optimistic future cop after the author whose entire career warned against optimistic future societies. That's either very clever or extremely on the nose. Maybe both. Number 5. The plagiarism claim nobody heard about. Demolition Man had an international plagiarism scandal attached to it, and almost nobody in the US ever heard about it. Hungarian author István Nemera claimed the film lifted heavily from his 1986 novel whose title translates to Fight of the Dead, and the premise is uncomfortably close. In Nemera's book, a terrorist and a counterterrorism soldier are cryogenically frozen, then wake up in a peaceful future society where violence has been deleted from the operating system. Nemera submitted his novel to a Hungarian copyright authority, which he says concluded the film was a 75% match to his book. No independent documentation of that ruling ever surfaced publicly, but nobody from Warner Brothers disputed it either. The lawsuit never materialized because Nemera openly admitted he couldn't afford to take on a Hollywood studio from Eastern Europe. Sci-fi has been freezing people and thawing them into weird futures for decades, so the concept isn't exclusively his, but Warner Brothers never commented and Nemera is still waiting on a check that probably won't come. Number 4. The explosion that saved the movie. That massive explosive opening where Stallone dives through flames and Snipes turns a city block into a parking lot was not in the original script. The earliest drafts of Demolition Man started in 2032, opening with cryo chambers and exposition, which is a bold choice for a Stallone action film, and also kind of a terrible one. Screenwriter Fred Decker came in for uncredited rewrites and pushed for the 1996 prologue. His reasoning was simple: if you don't show Kansas, Oz isn't all that special. Without seeing Spartan and Phoenix in full 90s chaos mode, the sanitized future of San Angeles is just a polite, mildly weird city. But drop the audience into raw destruction first, then smash cut to a world where swearing costs money, and that contrast becomes the entire joke. Spartan feels like a caveman thawed out in a yoga studio. Phoenix feels like a live grenade rolling across a meditation retreat. Without the prologue, you lose both dynamics entirely. Number 3. The deleted daughter twist. In early versions of the script, John Spartan had a daughter named Catherine who survived into 2032 and was living underground with the scraps. When Spartan finds her, she's roughly 50 years old, physically older than her own father. That's heavy sci-fi drama, and they actually filmed it. But the subplot got cut for pacing, and that single edit accidentally created a completely different problem. Spartan's daughter is still referenced in dialogue but never appears on screen, so test audiences filled in the blanks themselves. Sandra Bullock's Lenina Huxley was the only other prominent woman in the movie, and a significant chunk of viewers left early screenings convinced she was Spartan's daughter, which made the virtual sex scene something the filmmakers absolutely did not intend. The final cut had to make Huxley's role painfully clear. There's even a ghost of the deleted storyline still visible in the finished film. During the underground shootout, Spartan instinctively shields one specific female scrap from gunfire. That actress was playing his daughter in the original script. Number 2. The toy line that made no sense. Mattel looked at an R-rated movie where the main villain murders people with genuine enthusiasm and decided it belonged in the toy aisle next to Barbie's dream house. In 1993, Mattel released a full Demolition Man action figure line, and because spending money on fresh molds would have been too responsible, they recycled parts from their failed 1989 He-Man reboot. Every John Spartan figure was essentially He-Man squeezed into a future cop Halloween costume. Same torso, same limbs, completely different career path. Simon Phoenix shared body parts with obscure He-Man villains, which is a sentence that should not exist. The lineup included 4 versions of Spartan, 2 of Phoenix, and 0 Lenina Huxley figures. Sandra Bullock carried the film, and Mattel's response was another Stallone repaint in a slightly different shade of blue. The figures warmed clearance bins by 1994 but have since become collector favorites, not because they were well made, but because they're the most perfectly absurd artifact of 90s corporate marketing. Number 1. The franchise war that changed worldwide. In Demolition Man's version of 2032, the franchise wars wiped every restaurant off the face of the earth, and the lone survivor of total corporate annihilation was Taco Bell. The studio approached Taco Bell about being the punchline of an R-rated dystopian satire, and Taco Bell said yes immediately. The chain watched a movie declare their food the last cuisine standing after the collapse of civilization and thought, yeah, we can work with that. But here's where it gets strange. In 1993, Taco Bell barely existed outside North America. You can't build a dystopian gag around a restaurant your entire audience has never heard of. So the studio pulled off something almost unheard of at the time. They ripped Taco Bell out of the movie completely and dropped Pizza Hut in for European releases. Stallone and Bullock re-recorded dialogue, signs were digitally swapped, and logos were replaced across the board. This was a full surgical operation on a finished film, and it was only possible because both chains were owned by PepsiCo at the time. Same corporate overlord, just a different menu. That swap created decades of genuine confusion, with entire Mandela effect arguments fueled by grown adults screaming at each other about which fast food chain won a fictional war. And there you have it, 15 weird and wild facts about Demolition Man. What fact surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, share this with a friend who still doesn't know how to use the 3 seashells, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell.